Let's figure out what's going on right now inside that courtroom. Joining us outside of the courthouse, New York City, the courthouse in New York City, NBC News correspondent Rahema Ellis. Also outside of the courthouse, if I can talk today, criminal defense attorney and former Manhattan prosecutor Duncan Levin, and the president of the National Action Network and host of Politics Nation right here on MSNBC, Reverend Al Sharpton. All right, so Emil Bovey, Rahema, is arguing right now that the prosecution needs to be dropped because of national security.
Yeah, it seems to be one of the arguments, because what happened when he was indicted, Mayor Adams was denied his clearance for national security. And the prosecution is the prosecution is arguing that that's an impediment to the mayor being able to do his job in a city like New York, where threats to security are common. They're well known. Here we are in the city where Ground Zero and 9/11 happened. So he's saying that's one of the reasons why they want this dismissed. It's interesting. One of the questions that the judge asked of Bovey in his back and forth with him was the fact that you're asking for this to be dismissed without prejudice. He's saying, could the Department of Justice refile charges against the mayor at some later date? And Bovey says that would be up to the discretion of the department. He went on, the judge did, to ask Mayor Adams whether or not he had been promised anything as a result of a dismissal. He said no. He said, have you written anything? He just wanted to make it very clear, to find out very clearly from the mayor whether or not there was anything in exchange. You were talking about there's been some concern from attorneys, those who resigned from their post here, that there was some quid pro quo with this request for a dismissal, meaning that the charges would be dismissed, but in turn, the mayor would cooperate with the Trump administration in terms of enforcement of immigration policies. The mayor is saying that there are no promises here and that he would do his job. He was also saying that if the charges were brought back against him, he said, Your Honor, I did not commit any crime, suggesting that he will continue to defend himself vigorously if in the event that these charges are dropped and they are brought forward, or even if the judge refuses to dismiss these charges. Katie?
Duncan, let me ask you about the judge's role here. Why does the federal government even need to take this case in front of a judge? They want to drop the charges. Why do they have to get that okayed?
Well, the federal rules of criminal procedure have a specific provision saying that there needs to be the permission of the judge to be able to sign off on this. Now, you could say, well, why is that? Because the judge has virtually no power. As Bovey said in court today, the court really has very little power here at all, except to maybe make a record. I think this is almost a piece of judicial theater, because at the end of the day, even if the judge is in a position to say that these charges can't go forward and have to be reinstated, there's really not much that he can do to force the prosecution other than having an empty chair sit there. So there's very little power he has, and so it's almost perfunctory at this point. It's just a vestige of the federal rules of criminal procedure to permit this to go forward.
Duncan, there's been quite an outcry about this. I know Danielle Sassoon alleged a quid pro quo. Adams is denying this. But if you just read the paperwork that we've seen on it, you do see Emil Bovey saying that they needed Mayor Adams' help for immigration. He said it again today, calling the immigration issue part of a national security threat. Is this something that you've seen before in your history as a lawyer, where there has been a situation where the federal government steps in and says, no, we don't want to do this prosecution, at least in the past 30, 40 years?
No, I mean, this is without precedent. I know we always throw that term around with the Trump administration, but it's without precedent because Emil Bovey is sitting there right now and he's all alone. And what's ironic about it is that he's gone through all these career prosecutors to try to get someone to sign on to the paperwork to recommend the dismissal of these charges. Today, as we are standing outside the courtroom, Emil Bovey is sitting there all alone. Until recently, he was a criminal defense attorney, and now he's representing the entire United States Department of Justice, recommending that these charges get dismissed. He couldn't bring another prosecutor with him because he went through so many of them who resigned in protest over this. And I think what's striking about it is that if you look at Danielle Sassoon's letter, for example, she could have resigned in a one-paragraph letter, but instead she chose to write a 9-page letter laying out, really for the judge and for the public, all the reasons why this case should go forward. And so it's without precedent for so many reasons, but I think it opens up a window showing that there are a lot of prosecutors at the Department of Justice who are very principled public servants who are there to do the right thing. And he can keep going through hundreds of them until he finds somebody who's willing to sign on and stand before the judge. He came and did it alone. It's a very lonely seat today, sitting there in that courtroom. But in fact, it's the most powerful seat because there's really very little that anyone can do to stop him.
All right, so Rev, let's talk about the political implications here. I know you're, a longtime ally of Mayor Adams, but the city seems to be questioning his leadership right now. You've got the deputy mayor stepping down. There are questions about how the government is going to adequately be able to function in a moment like this. There's also questions from individual New Yorkers about where Mayor Adams' allegiance now lies. You heard me mention a moment ago, the New York Times did some reporting on this. I mean, I've certainly had conversations with tons of folks in this city, but one gentleman in particular saying he's a puppet. He's a Pinocchio mayor now. How tenable is this position of his?
I think that I've made it clear that I've been a friend of the mayor's for years, but we have disagreed. And I strongly disagree that the mayor is some victim of a political vendetta. I've said that to him. I've said that any number of times in public. And I think that it was in the mayor's interest to go to trial and prove himself innocent if he's innocent. Just because someone you've been known a lot of years does not mean that you're going to not look at the fact that it is very suspect to me that this White House and this Justice Department wanted to have the trial put off with no prejudice so that they can try him again. When if they felt if President Trump genuinely felt that he was a victim of a political vendetta, then why didn't he pardon him? And my only answer that I could think of, he wouldn't pardon him because then they wouldn't have this leash to yank on him if he didn't do what they wanted him to do. When he sat on Fox television the other morning and Holman said to his face, if you didn't do what we wanted, I'd be up your butt. I've never seen a mayor of a major city, the major city in the country, so humiliated, and he took that. So I've said, and I repeat, that I think that the culprit in this is the Trump administration manipulating this situation, having the people fight against a black U.S. attorney, Damon Williams, against a black mayor, and having us in the middle. The people will decide the primary and an election, but I think this judge today, having a little power, whatever power he has, ought to raise the question, do you have evidence to say that this was a political vendetta? What is the evidence? Do you have evidence to say that to indict him 9 months before the primary is too short a time when many people campaign early? So that would mean all you have to do is say, I'm gonna run for office to stop an indictment. And do you have any evidence that standing up saying, I agree with the president on immigration or I agree with the president on other matters is grounds for a criminal indictment voted by the grand jury should not stand? That, to me, would be unprecedented.
Rev, you know the city as well as I do. And there are quite a few people in the city who want more immigration enforcement, who don't think it's fair what's happening with the migrants, are uncomfortable with it. It's part of the reason why Donald Trump got more votes in the city last time around than he did when he first ran. How does Mayor Adams, how does he accomplish that without tarnishing it for everybody who may even want that? How does he continue to lead this city? Why has he not resigned?
You'd have to ask him. I really don't know. There are many that have said he should resign. But you'd have to say, though, even if he's right on the immigration policy, and he and I disagree, and we've talked about that disagreement on immigration policy, separation of families, just arbitrarily taking people, disregarding safe spaces like churches and schools is to me, unthinkable. But even if you agree with his immigration policy, do you then therefore give him criminal immunity? This is what we're talking about. You're setting a precedent that now if somebody's in office and doing something that you like, you can wipe them clean in terms of criminal prosecution. That's the threat. And as far as immigration policy, the same president that says he's cracking down on the people from Mexico and Haiti coming across the border just said that he would give refugee status to whites in South Africa that he thinks are being oppressed. And he's asking Canada to join us as a 51st state. You can't have it both ways. Either the country can't handle more or we're saying we can only handle certain kind of people.